Okay, so we're still speaking about the Benoni here on chapter 13. And in the last few paragraphs, we've been focusing on the definition of truth and how there's a piece of truth in every one of us, which is God. That's our very essence. That's the only true way we can be defined. You know, you ask someone today, who are you? They'll give you their business card, or they'll identify themselves in all sorts of other ways. But yeah, what the Tanya tries to do is to redefine the person himself and the truth within that person. And that is that we are a piece of God. We are our souls. Now, we may not feel it all the time, as we've been saying so many times, and we may be immersed in all sorts of things that seem like we're soil and not soul, like we've said. But really, our real definition should be the soul. And that's how the Benoni chooses to see himself. And therefore, the Benoni is not discouraged also by the lows of life, because he experiences high. In fact, every single day, at least during the prayers, during the Shema, during the Amidah, as we've said, he experiences that soul. But then he goes back to his daily routine. But he's not discouraged, because the Benoni is different in a way that he knows that his real truth is those highs. And those lows won't be able, therefore, to define him or to limit him, even though he may be experiencing them very strongly. In many ways, I think it's a lesson for each and every one of us. There may be some Benonis here, but so you already know this. But if life throws at you all sorts of things, the worst thing that can happen is that you start defining yourselves by those things, or by the reactions sometimes that you have to those things, whether it's frustration, or you start saying to yourself, well, okay, maybe I'm not supposed to achieve great things because all these things are limiting me. That's not how the Benoni thinks. Benoni knows that he's a soul, and therefore is infinite, and his potential is infinite. And he's not fazed by the limits of life, because he views himself as a soul, and that's the real truth. So that's really the big idea that we've been sharing. Let's continue here again, as you said, Margot, at the bottom of page 17. Again, if you don't have a PDF, I'm happy to share it with you. So just ask me via the chat, or you can contact Margot too. But on this page, it's right here, the bottom of page 17, right here. Okay, let's go. Does anyone want to read? Unless we got a default reader. Yeah, Margot.
I'll read.
Okay, Amy, please go for it.
Margot. Okay. In this sense, the Benoni can also reach a personal truth in his subjective experience, neither absolute nor eternal, but also neither imaginary nor contrived, because the Benoni himself has not achieved in his soul the balance and wholeness that are imperative for this. If he could achieve this internal perfection, he would no longer be Benoni, but a tzaddik. The Benoni's truth, when he prays, when he perceives sensorially, is his subjective truth. It is not false, but it is strictly his own, each according to his level as a Benoni. And the Benoni, as mentioned, has countless diverse levels.
Right. And the reason the Benoni has countless diverse levels is because, as we said, the difference between a Benoni and a tzaddik is that a Benoni did not get rid of his animal soul. So his animal soul is still, in a way, bothering him. Maybe not on the level of speech and action, as we said in the past, but in the level of thought, it tries to permeate. So that creates somewhat of an earthquake for the Benoni from time to time. At least it shakes his life. But he's not fazed by that. And in many ways, I think that's the way, that's the Tanya's way to tell us also not to be fazed by that. That we may be experiencing many, many different things, but okay, we know that we are one with God, and that's all that matters. You know, one of the great parables is with, I don't know if I've shared it before, but is about a mother traveling with her child, with her infant, let's say from Phoenix to New York, from New York to Paris, from Paris to Tel Aviv. And then from Tel Aviv to any destination you want to name it, anyone here? From Tel Aviv to Moscow, okay? All right. Now you ask, when the mother and the infant arrive in Moscow, you ask the mother, where were you? She said, well, I was in Phoenix, I was in New York, I was in Tel Aviv, and I was in Moscow, in Paris, sorry, and I was in Tel Aviv, and I was in Moscow. You ask the infant, where were you? If the infant knows how to speak, but the infant will somehow communicate that, I don't know, I was in my mother's arms. And in many ways, that response of the infant should be our response each and every day. Because we travel to all sorts of places, maybe not physically, but in our minds, we travel maybe to hundreds, if not thousands of places. And that is really sometimes the source of our stress, of our frustration, maybe even of our lack of belief in ourselves, because it's exhausting, it's draining. But the Benoni is in many ways like that infant. It says, you know what, I may be traveling to all sorts of places. Yes, I'm aware of that. But at the end of the day, I'm in my mother's arms. I'm in God's arms. So regardless of where life takes me, I'm always in the same place. And that's the power of what the Tanya is saying right here, that if we can define ourselves by our truth, the soul, and really be one with it, then the many travels of this world won't faze us. That's the big idea. You know, it's interesting, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, by the way, once he became a Rebbe, he never traveled. And he always stayed in one place. But in many ways, Hasidim would say that this was true not just physically, but also spiritually. That he always stayed in one place. And that's what tzaddikim do. They stay in one place. They don't, the world, yes, changes around us and life changes, but we're anchored. That's all that counts. Okay.
He never went to Israel either.
That's right. And for good reasons, I would say. As he himself said, I think the Lubavitcher Rebbe is the only human being on earth who never had not a day of vacation, an hour of vacation. And traveling in general takes a lot of hours and days off your timetable, your schedule. He didn't have the luxury to take those hours off. I think that's on a simple level. On another level, I think he had many answers to that question, but anyway, we're not going to go there. Okay, but the idea again is a spiritual idea, that we're anchored and we're one with Hashem, one with our soul, Hashem in us, that doesn't matter where we are, doesn't matter how we travel, it doesn't matter what falls on us. You know, it's interesting because we find that idea in just in yesterday's portion, if we want to elaborate on it, because and we mentioned it yesterday a little bit, but I'm not going to repeat the whole speech of yesterday, but just the main idea, and that is that we say each and every day that we should love our God with all our heart, and of course with all our soul and with all our might. But what does it mean to love God with all our heart? Rashi says that you shouldn't argue with hamakom, which is another word for God. Now, what does that mean? What this means is that if you really love God, you know that hamakom, the place that you're in, is the place that you're meant to be in. And therefore, you don't argue with that place. It could be a very frustrating place, but you don't argue with it because you know that God sent you there. You don't just happen to be there. And he sent you there because he has a mission for you there. So what this really means, connecting to this idea, is that we may be in the most frustrating place in the world, not just physical place, I'm saying, emotional place, you know, a spiritual place. I may not be where I am, where I want to be, where my soul wants to be. Or I may not be where my job wants to be. I want a promotion. Or I may not be where my relationship wants to be. I'm not getting along with everyone. But it doesn't matter. You are there because God wants you to be there, and He has a mission for you there. And once we connect to this idea, then we become one with our deepest core, with our soul and its purpose. And that in of itself turns the place into a heavenly place. In many ways, that's what a Benoni does. That's how he functions. Never becomes bitter by the place that he's in, however terrible that place may be. Because he knows that he has a mission there. Rabbi Stein says, and I've said this before, and by the way, Rabbi Stein says Yortzeit, we're learning his commentary here. And so we should all know that his Yortzeit falls this coming Tuesday night and Wednesday on the 17th of Av. It's going to be his 4th Yortzeit. We miss him terribly. But Rabbi Steinzas would often tell us, his students, that he's not like the Breslever Rebbe. Because the Breslever Rebbe, Rabbi Nachman of Breslev, told his Hasidim that they should grow side locks, the payas, so that if they end up in hell, then Rabbi Nachman of Breslev will go and pull them out of hell through their side locks. Rabbi Steinzas will tell us, if you end up in hell, and sometimes he would add, and I'm sure some of you will, but just to, that was his shock treatment way of dealing with things sometimes. But he says, I won't come and save you. I won't come and pull you from your side locks, whether you have some or not. I will come and visit you, and I will tell you that you now have a new mission. And your new mission is to turn hell into heaven. In many ways, that represents exactly this idea that we may find ourselves in hell, but we are not just there because of chance. We're there because God has a mission for us to turn hell into heaven. And that makes us one with God Himself and, of course, with His desire of us. Anyway, so that's how the Benoni really functions. There's a powerful take on the word Benoni, and in many ways represents who the Benoni is and who we should all strive to be, because it's an interesting definition. Think about it. We have 5 categories, right? As the Tanya was saying at the very beginning in chapter 1. There's the complete righteous, the incomplete righteous, and then the lowest 2 is the complete wicked and the incomplete wicked, and then in the middle, you have a Benoni, someone who's like in between. That's a literal translation. Bein levein, in between. And what does that mean? I mean, can't you find, just call the Benoni someone who, maybe you can call him Oved. Like there's an expression like that, Oved Hashem, someone who's still working on himself. He still maybe hasn't reached the highest height. But what does that mean in between? You're not here and you're not there. It's the same Yiddish, right? Nicht daher and nicht dahin and nicht daher. So what type of a definition is it to give to any type of category, of human category? And the answer is because it relates really to the ability of the Benoni to never be completely overcome by life. The Benoni is never in this world. He's never drowned by the troubles and tribulations of this world. Rather, he's in between heaven and in between earth. That's where he is. That's why he's called a Benoni. He knows that he doesn't belong to this world, yet he has to be in this world and to live in this world. He's not a monk. He's not a Catholic priest. He has to be in this world and live in this world. But on the other hand, he knows that he's not from this world. He's from the heavens. So he has to stay above it. So he's in that in-between space. And in many ways, that in-between space is really what saves the Benoni and what enables the Benoni to be so successful. Because he might be in this world and might be overcome but might be facing many, many of this world's challenges and obstacles. But he says, okay, It's just this world. I'm above it. Remember, I come from higher. I'm in between this world and heaven. I'm never really fully drowned in this world. And that's his talent, or his very modus operandi, mode of operation. And that's how he's successful, really, in not allowing Phoenix and New York and Paris and Tel Aviv and Moscow to rattle him. Okay, let's continue, and let's please speak up your minds.
Rabbi, can
Yes.
you add that story about the women who were quote unquote stuck at one of the airports when it was very crowded, there was a shutdown, and they proceeded to. It's a beautiful story, and I don't know if everyone knows it.
No, it's a great story. The woman that we're speaking about is an amazing woman. I know her well. She lives in Jerusalem. She's an educator par excellence. Her name is Miriam Swidlove. And she tells the story of how in the 60s she was stuck in Detroit on a Friday afternoon at the airport after her flight back home to New York was canceled. There was a snowstorm and they canceled the flights, and she didn't know what to do. She wanted to get home for Shabbat. So she called the Lubavitcher Rebbe's office to get some advice. And the secretary of the late Lubavitcher Rebbe picked up the phone, and she says to him, look, I need the Rebbe's advice. I'm stuck here in Detroit. My flight was just canceled and I want to get home for Shabbat. I need his advice. I need his blessing. And the secretary goes to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, look, Miriam Swidlove is stuck with a bunch of women in Detroit. And the Rebbe told the secretary, go tell Miriam Swidlove that I don't know what the word stuck means.
Yeah.
So Miriam Swidlove said, what do you mean? The Rebbe doesn't speak English. Stuck means I'm stuck. And the Rebbe had to explain himself and say, no, he knows what it means, but he doesn't know what it refers to, because a Jew is never stuck. She got the message. She said, okay, that's right. I'm not stuck. I'm meant to be in the Detroit airport. And she started to smile at everyone. She started to give out Shabbat candles to women, since it was Friday, and encourage them to light Shabbat candles that Friday. In fact, she's kept in touch with some of them until this very day, some of them, just that act that changed their lives. And then she realized indeed that there's no such thing as stuck. That's right. You never stuck. Stuck means that you're overcome by this world. But a Beinoni is above it. Remember, you can never be stuck, no matter how strong the currents of this world are. Now, thank you for that reminder, Amy.
I would just like to question you on, maybe I misunderstood.
Yes.
I think especially the Jewish people, we have more wonder and wanderlust than any other people. We don't accept where we are. We keep moving on. Physically,
right.
From one country to another country. Look at the Rambam, for example. He didn't accept being in Spain. He fled to the Fez, and then he went back to Israel.
Right.
I think, we keep moving in a certain direction, but we don't really know where we're going to end. But we can't stop and sit down and say, this is our place and we accept where we are. I don't think so.
No, I agree. And I think that's a good point, because it is reflective of that quality of the Beinoni that we all share, that we don't belong to this world. And that's why maybe we never find ourselves in any place in this world, right? We're, like you said, the wandering Jew. Because we feel like no place can and should limit us. So we're always wandering. I think that really is reflective of that inner being that exists, that the soul doesn't belong in this world. I think it's true, by the way, not just for the Jew altogether. I think it's true for individuals. I mean, sometimes we find individuals that don't find their place in this place or in that job or in many other places that they may be. And sometimes what they have to do is really look inwards and say to themselves, well, why? Why am I not liking this job? Or why am I not happy in this place? Is it because my soul feels that it's suffocated in this place? Sometimes that's the answer, and then you have to make a move. Sometimes it's just because you're not connected to your purpose for that place. But it's certainly the soul speaking to you. And it's reflective of
the greatest movement, I think, has in this century has been the women, how the status of women have changed in education and in so many ways. They're not just meant to stay home and make big children. And, you know, the world has changed, and they've changed the most, I think. And then you have the gay lesbian community also that have come out of the closet, and, you know, they're looking for their place too. So I think it's a positive thing for people to find their place and not just to accept where they were put by other people.
That's right. Absolutely. But again, I would go back to the first place that they have to go to when there's the people that I'm speaking to myself too, that we all have to go to when the world is suffocating us, or at least is shaking around us, is to the deeper self. Let's ask ourselves, let's speak to ourselves and say, well, what is the soul telling me here? Is it telling me that I'm not fulfilling my purpose in the place I'm in, and that's why I'm feeling frustrated? Or is it telling me that this place is really not good for me? So, yeah, I think that's the way things work. You know, it starts with, I think that's the beauty of Shabbat. Speaking of Shabbat, that's exactly why we have a Shabbat each and every week. Shabbat, the word Shabbat shares the same letters as the word Tashuv, which means to return. Because what are we meant to do on Shabbat more than anything else? Not just have Kiddush and Tzelechaim, and not just eat a nice challah. On Shabbat, what we do is Tashuv. We have to return to our deeper self, because during the 6 days of the week, we're in this world. And it can really rattle us. So on Shabbat, we say, one second. Let's speak to ourselves. Let's return to the soul. Let's see what the soul really wants. How should it fulfill its purpose? Should it be in the places that we were in this past week? Should we change things for the next week? Let's first recalibrate, realign ourselves with our deeper self. And then we can face the 6 days of the week anew. And that's really the brilliance of Shabbat. And that's why we have a day like that once a week, because it's important to check on ourselves, on our souls, at least once a week. Yeah, that's...
This directly is connected to the idea that Hamakom is one of the names of Hashem, correct?
Right, that's correct. Yeah, very, very, very well. And by the way, it's used, Hamakom is used, and I can name multiple examples, but it's used specifically to speak about places that we don't want to be in. The maybe most extreme example is that when we comfort a mourner, we say, Hamakom yanachem etchem, which means, may the place comfort you, referring to God, right? But why are we using the word Hamakom for that context? And the reason is because no mourner wants to be where he is. And there was a void created also with the death of a person. So what we're telling the mourner is, we don't know why death happens. But that place now, that void needs to be filled with meaning, with purpose. That legacy of the person needs to continue to live on. So respond to your death with life, or to your destruction with construction. And that's how you'll turn your Hamakom into a divine one. So the word Hamakom indeed is used particularly to share this very message. In many ways, I think that this is true on an individual level, but it's true on a national level too. I mean, October 7th happened, and no one can understand why. And we have to shout and protest, because that's what Jews do. Just like Moses did most of his life, most of his public life, I would say. But On the other hand, we also have to ask ourselves, okay, so many Jews were taken away from us and such evil happened. How can we respond to fill that place? We were put here. We were sent here to this place. We don't understand why, but every one of us has to see ourselves as emissaries to get rid of this evil by filling this void with good, each in our own way. And that's really what the Beinoni does. It's not that the Beinoni is numb to this world, or he's pained by this world, very much so. But at the same time, he's in his mother's arms, as we said, and being in his mother's arms, he hears his mother's messages, saying, okay, I'm holding you, I'll be there with you all the time, but you have this mission, this divine mission. And that's all that counts, and that's the only thing that can define you.